for the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The only question is, how exactly is it going to happen? We have heard so many rumors and so many reports that the MCU is going to reboot. And based off of the recent announcements from Kevin Feige, the president of Marvel Studios, and the rest of the team, it's very clear that this is indeed what they're going to do in a certain way. But the reality is, they actually do need to do this, and they really have set it up in a perfect way. You see, right now, despite however you feel or whatever you think about the MCU, right now, they are in an extremely great position to have the next 20 years of the MCU be absolutely amazing. And while Marvel may have struggled over the past few years implementing Disney Plus and going through the writer strikes, the actor strikes, the pandemic, making Kang the main villain of the multiverse saga, who originally was not intended to be the main villain, but then having Jonathan Majors go through all of the legal issues and firing him and getting rid of Kang now and replacing him with Doctor Doom, despite all of that, Marvel is in a great position right now to give us the fan.
Speaking of Jonathan Majors, I've seen the TMZ video, and my nigga is really heartbroken over the fact that they didn't keep him in the MCU because of his personal issues with the crazy person that he was dating, the Caucasian woman that he was in a relationship with. It turns out he ended up taking an L for no reason, but when she was one that was a perpetrator, that was the aggressor in a DV relationship, and he ended up losing his job and his career. At least he's happy to see the MCU thrive on the next level of seeing the entire franchise rebooting, reinventing itself from the past 10 to 15 years in the MCU. So I don't know what God has planned for him though, but I hope that he'll kill it in his next project, his newer projects. Let's continue.
And it doesn't start with the reboot. It starts right now in the MCU. The reboot, of course, is a part of it,
the Fantastic
huge
Four,
part
baby.
of it. But let me explain really what the future of the MCU looks like, not only right now, but over the next several years. We're talking 10 plus years. But
so God be the glory. I'll be here for the next 10 or 20 years to see our franchise come to life.
Catch the video that we did yesterday, Marvel Studios and really Disney updated their release schedule. They didn't reveal what all of the untitled Marvel movies were, but they did give us the release dates, and there are 2 movies coming after Avengers Secret Wars. Now, while we can speculate about what these movies are going to be, we pretty much assume that the last film is going to be Avengers Secret Wars Part 2. As far as what the middle film will be, who knows? But there could be a Secret Wars Part 2, and that would be when everything for this current MCU that we know essentially ends. Not completely end in the way that you think it's going to, but we'll get to that in just a bit. But right now, we know what is going to happen all the way up until Avengers Secret Wars or Avengers Secret Wars Part 2. With the release of Deadpool and Wolverine, we have learned that the X-Men that we have seen throughout all the Fox universe do exist in the same universe as Deadpool. And that universe is Universe 10,005. And what might be true, because many insiders have stated this, is that our universe, and very specifically our Earth, because when incursions happen, they are centered around the Earths of each universe. So when 2 universes collide, it's the Earth that you see first colliding with the other Earth. And according to many different insiders, our universe is headed for a collision with the 10,005 universe. And these won't be the only incursions, of course, that happen throughout the entire multiverse. In the comics, the story that leads up to Avengers Secret Wars is the Time Runs Out storyline. And in that storyline, we find out that Doctor Doom, who was actually trying to prevent the destruction of the multiverse, he was trying to stop the incursions, accidentally causes the first incursion, and due to some events that take place, he literally causes the multiverse to go from having hundreds of thousands of different universes in it to having less than a couple of dozen. And then eventually we go on to have no universes, but we have Battleworld, which is a world that Doctor Doom created via the remnants of a bunch of destroyed universes. But most people know how—
That is crazy. Like, imagine them actually adapting that storyline into the film. Like, we all know that maybe Tobey Maguire and Hugh Jackman are going to be in the same screen together in Secret Wars, maybe like Part 1 and Part 2. Like, just think about it though. And maybe have Tom Holland, Spider-Man, getting his black suit for the first time from the comics. Like, think of so many good storylines that you could adapt from the comics into the film. And at some point, when Doctor Doom was trying to fix the multiverse, he ended up causing it, which means that everybody from different universes from their timeline is going to end up fighting against one another, all because of Doctor Doom's shenanigans. That is crazy, right?
The powers of the Beyonder via Molecule Man, but eventually, at the very end of Secret Wars, and this is the 2015 Secret Wars, by the way, just to be specific there. But at the end, Doctor Doom and Reed Richards fight, and ultimately Molecule Man takes the power of the Beyonders that Doctor Doom has and gives them to Reed Richards. From there, Reed Richards restores the multiverse. So that's pretty much the first part of this, of the future of the MCU.
Yeah, I can see them doing that in the Fantastic Four film.
Robert Downey Jr. has already been announced to return as Doctor Doom, so obviously Doom is going to be the main antagonist of the next 2 films, Doomsday and Secret Wars. Maybe 3 films if we get a part 2. And we're assuming and making educated guesses.
Because Robert is such a good actor. I know that everybody is really having debates on him returning to the MCU as another character. But when you think about it, it's kind of hard to get other actors that can portray Doctor Doom's evil shenanigans. But can't nobody do it like Robert Downey Jr. because he's been in multiple projects since ages. So if anybody that is normally well known to play a complicated character is this man himself. So I'm not saying that I'm happy that he's Doctor Doom. I still have some mixed personal thoughts about it, but I'm gonna keep it to myself. The only thing I can do is just wait and see how he does in 2026. So just let them cook. Let us see what he can do, what he can perform as Doctor Doom, because he might not perform as Tony Stark. He might perform as a different character as Doctor Doom. So at the end of the day, take it or leave it.
Deadpool and Wolverine, you know what I'm talking about there. But we assume, since incursions have been mentioned many times, since the destruction of timelines have been talked about often, and the destruction of the entire sacred timeline has been talked about, that eventually all of them will indeed be destroyed and Secret Wars will happen, and we'll be left with a battle world, or one single plane, one single universe left after all of the multiverse gets destroyed. This will put the Fox X-Men and probably some newer X-Men that might not make it into the new universe after Secret Wars.
Honestly, I really don't want to see the newer X-Men. I want to see the older X-Men from the Fox's universe. Like how Hugh Jackman was in Deadpool and Wolverine. Give them comic accurate costumes. Like we've seen Channing Tatum as Gambit. I want to see him in the Secret Wars. All of the X-Men characters in Secret Wars, because that'll make sense. Because if we try putting in newer X-Men characters that nobody has ever heard of before, then it's gonna left a lot of people with questions, a lot of mixed opinions and thoughts about this. I'm just saying.
Avengers, the Fantastic Four. We'll get probably an Illuminati team from another universe, since we've already seen that. There's talks recently, and this is just a rumor, that Marvel Studios has once again tried to get Tom Cruise to play Superior Iron Man at some point in time in the MCU. It's Avengers Secret Wars.
They might have him do
that.
Run
crazy. We know there's going to be some
we don't know how
and
Tom
Deadpool and
Cruise
Wolverine
is.
proved that it can be done extremely well. We know it's going to be huge, but we also know that eventually the multiverse will be restored in one way, shape, or form. And everything leading up to this point, I'll say, should be amazing. It should be, if they do everything right. And if Deadpool and Wolverine is any indication that they can,
I mean, they were the one that fixed
the
timeline in the film.
But what comes next might actually be even better, and in theory it should be. You see, in the Secret Wars comics, once everything is restored, it's not restored to its entire originality. What ends up happening is you have some of the characters who are from other universes ending up in the 616 universe, like Miles Morales. This is pretty much what Marvel Studios is going to do. We're going to have a new universe one way or another, whether that means our universe kind of gets completely destroyed and doesn't get restored to its originality, or a bunch of universes actually combine with each other. But if Marvel were smart, and let's hope they are, they'll create a new universe which essentially just has remnants of all of the other universes that were destroyed. And there's a really big reason that this is the exact way that they should do it. One is so some of the characters who aren't necessarily done with their stories yet can still exist. Like Spider-Man, if everything that we've heard is true about his contract, then after Avengers Secret Wars, he still has 3 more films under his belt. Spider-Man 5, Spider-Man 6, and then 1 more big team-up film. So if that is truly the case, then he is sticking around after seeing the characters that aren't doing so well that people really don't care about. I won't mention any specific, but when I said that, you definitely had characters pop up in your head. But perhaps the biggest reason is so they can start from the ground up with the new universe having the origins of the new X-Men. This new universe is going to be the very first time that Marvel Studios has access to all of the Marvel characters. Spider-Man, the X-Men, the Fantastic Four, the Avengers, the Inhumans, everybody. And it should be built from the ground up, just like Iron Man started off the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and from there they built all of these characters up individually, then had them come together to form the Avengers in a really big way. That is how the X-Men should be handled. Now, I'm not saying you have to start entirely from scratch, but in this new universe that is going to exist, new people are going to exist. And to do it right, I think it would be really cool to show the origin of not only the X-Men team, but the characters as well. And that is the opportunity that Marvel Studios has right.
But I don't think they're gonna, want to do that, because I think they should just make an X-Men film as a continuation, because Logan and Deadpool and Wolverine, when they fix their timeline, Logan is gonna end up being around more. So that movie pretty much just set up the X-Men debut in the MCU, because Logan has mentioned in Storm, Beast, Cyclops, like among others, including a tribute to Professor X, who died in the Logan film. But then all of a sudden he just came back in Doctor Doom too. So I don't know how they're gonna probably like debut the X-Men in the MCU in a big way, but I just hope and pray exactly what they're doing. So
to really just play out this huge story, possibly the biggest story from Marvel Comics, one of them at least, or 2 of them I should say, because there are 2 versions of Secret Wars. This has the potential to be bigger than Infinity War and Endgame, and guess what?
I believe
the brothers who directed Endgame and Infinity War, also
I'm glad that
Captain
they're back.
Civil War and The Winter Soldier, they're back to direct these 2 films. They brought back Robert Downey Jr. to carry these films, and it sounds like he still is Tony Stark, but also playing Doctor Doom, 2 of the biggest characters that we know in one.
So is he playing like Dr. Jekyll or Mr. Hyde? One minute he's Iron Man, and the next he's Victor, Dr. Doom? Like, if you read the comics leading up to that moment, I think we might end up seeing that happen on the big screen in 2026. Like, it is definitely possible somehow.
They can to make this story huge. And like I said, if it's executed in the right way, it will be. And then when it ends, fans will be disappointed and sad because it's the end of an era or the end of a saga, but the potential that the new one has is even greater than anything that we've had before, because you can build up the X-Men and you can build up a new Avengers team. And we've actually heard rumors at this point, not confirmed obviously, but we have heard that another reason they want to do this reboot is so they can bring Iron Man back, Captain America back, Black Widow, a new version of the Hulk, etc., and have them be completely different than the ones that we've seen so far, and have them be played by new actors, essentially starting from scratch. And yes, it will be a sad moment where all of what we knew before is kind of done, but we knew it would have to happen eventually.
That is interesting. Okay.
Going to play Tony Stark /
I kind of understand where he's coming from, because as an actor, you'd be playing the same character for over a decade. The last thing you want to do is burned out and have somebody else play the iconic character, somebody who was young in the early 30s and 20s, young and fresh, up and coming, someone who was a great experience, unknown actors to play the comic characters just right. It could be a fresh start for the new MCU. If that were to be the case, because this is pretty much basically facts here.
In Captain America, Mark Ruffalo and the Hulk, and even Tom Holland says, you know, he doesn't want to play Spider-Man for the rest of his life. He wants to pass that on to somebody else. This has been a really long time.
That's good, though.
And since we're saying goodbye to those actors playing those characters, it would be cool to be able to keep some of those characters who would be completely different than before,
and
played by new actors. That way, we can have insane build-ups. Like, you could build up the X-Men individually, then have them come together in a big X-Men film, like they did with the Avengers. And at the same time, you can start to build up a new Avengers team as well, have them come together in a big Avengers movie, do more Fantastic Four movies, do some Inhuman movies, and then have an insanely huge movie where they all come together. All of the teams come together to fight some big villain who threatens their world. Not their multiverse, because they probably shouldn't dive too much into the multiverse after the multiverse saga, but that's the really cool part about the next saga. They're all going to share one world. They're going to occupy the same space. It won't be like a bunch of teams coming from different universes. They're all going to be in the same planet, and I personally think we don't know. That's going to be really cool. And that's why I believe that this reboot that everybody has been talking about for a while is a really good idea. And when you have so many teams like the X-Men, the Avengers, the Fantastic Four, you have so many stories to do individually and together as well, that you really have enough stories, enough content to last 20 years. So we know what the future is, and the future honestly looks really, really good. But
so this is pretty much a good video. Shout out to you, by the way. I like how he broke down everything from adapting storylines from the Secret Wars comics into the movies and TV shows and whatnot. And I think with all of that he said might be true, that they're going to end up doing something like that in the MCU. I think Phase 5 is going to end up being the craziest year in the MCU. So I also like the fact that he said that even though this might be a sad case for these old actors to go on and move on to other projects, you can still see new actors playing the same characters, but having a fresh take built up into the heroes that we know them today. So pretty much like he said, Robert Downey Jr. playing Iron Man in his first movie from the ground up to where he is right now. So I believe it. So what are your thoughts on this, man? Let me know in the comments down below. And are you excited for Phase 5? Let me know in the chat.